Hi, I'm Jeremy, the Zoo Nerd, coming to you live from my backyard in beautiful Los Angeles, California. How are you doing today? I hope you're well. I hope you're happy. I hope you're having a good Friday. And I hope you're being healthy. Oh, big leaf. Today on our Critter Chat, we're going to be talking about what has been dubbed the world's most deadly bird, the cassowary. Now, there's some pretty good claims as to why this bird species is the most deadly in the world, because they've actually killed people. The most recent death from a cassowary happened in Florida last year, where a man who raises cassowaries on his private land was attacked by a cassowary, and the injuries he received from that attack, he got to the hospital, but he unfortunately died. So cassowaries have been known to kill people. They are therefore known as the world's deadliest bird. In general, most birds are not very deadly at all, and it's very rare that a bird is capable of killing a human. And the cassowary is kind of a good exception of that. During this Critter Chat, we'll talk a little bit about how and why that's possible, and also explore a little bit more about these amazing birds and the unique role they play in their habitat. First of all, cassowaries are very large birds. By height, they're the third largest bird in the world after the ostrich and the emu. By weight, they're second. So they weigh more than emus do, but they're still smaller than ostriches in both height and weight. They come from the very northern tip of Australia and the big island that's just north of Australia called New Guinea, and some of the surrounding islands of New Guinea. So they live in Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and Australia. And there are actually 3 species of cassowary, and we'll talk a little bit more about those in just a moment. They are known for their coloration, especially. Their bodies are covered in long, dark, black feathers that are very shiny. And their feathers are particularly shiny along the middle part of the feather, not the little soft edges of the feather. It's kind of the middle part that's the shiniest. And their feathers are very sparse and very thin, almost looking like hair, which gives them a very unique presence on their main covering of their body. But it's really the bright colors on their heads and their neck that stand out. They typically have blue along their face, and that's the skin of their head, and along their necks, with sometimes purples, reds, yellows, and oranges on their throat as well. And 2 species of the 3 species of cassowary have what are called wattles. Wattles are kind of that dangly skin that hangs down from the neck of certain kinds of birds. If you think of a turkey has a wattle. That's probably the best known bird species that has a wattle. But 2 of the 3 cassowaries have wattles as well. The largest cassowary species is sometimes called the double wattled cassowary because it actually has 2 wattles. And then the medium-sized one is called the single wattled cassowary because it has 1 wattle on its neck. Cassowaries also have what is called a casque on top of their head. It kind of looks like a little helmet right on the very top, and it continues to grow throughout their lifetime. On the inside, it's kind of a spongy material, and it's said that if you touch it, if you squeeze in the middle, it actually gives a little, so it's a little bit squishy right in the middle of the casque. I've never been close enough to a cassowary to test that, and I don't anticipate being so. The outer ridge of the casque is covered in keratin, which is the same material that our fingernails are made out of, and also our hair. So a lot of animals have things made of keratin. Scientists are really not sure what the casque is used for in a cassowary, but there's a couple different theories. One is that it continues to grow throughout their life, and so a bigger casque may indicate that they're an older bird or a more dominant bird to other cassowaries, so they could kind of assess and size each other up by seeing how big the casque is on top of their head. It could also act as like a helmet, protecting the birds as they move throughout their very thick rainforest homes that they live in. And the third possible reason that they have a casque is related to their sound. If you remember on the critter chat that we did about hornbills, we also talked about the casque on top of their head and on top of their beak, and how that can also resonate their sound or amplify their sound quality in their squawks that they make in the rainforest. It's very possible that the same could be happening with a cassowary, although with hornbills it's on top of their beak. On cassowaries, it's on top of their head. The most threatening part of the cassowary is not its colors, nor its helmet, nor its bright colored head or throat. The most dangerous part of the cassowary is what's on the ground. It's its feet. Cassowaries have 3 toes on each foot, and the middle toes are armed with super long claws. There's claws on both the other toes as well. But the claw on the middle toe on each foot, or the inner toe, the toe most in the middle of the whole bird, that claw can be 4 to 5 inches in length. And it looks like a little dagger. It's a little terrifying. If a cassowary is close to you and feels threatened, it may kick to defend itself. And doing so, if you've ever seen Jurassic Park, they kind of got this idea for the velociraptors. It can kick, and that kick not only can push you over, but if that claw makes contact, it can cut you open pretty bad. And I believe that is what happened to the man in Florida who was killed by a cassowary last year. So those big claws are definitely the scariest part of a cassowary. So I mentioned earlier that there are 3 species of cassowary. The one that is most commonly seen in zoos is the kind that also lives in Australia as well as on New Guinea, called the southern or the double-wattled cassowary. These are also the biggest of the cassowaries. The females are almost 6 feet tall, so they're about as tall as I am, and they can weigh in at up to 167 pounds is the heaviest one they've found. Males typically weigh in around 120 pounds. They're a bit shorter as well. So in cassowaries, the females are bigger. Females also have a bigger casque. Females also are brighter colored on their heads and their necks. Now the southern or double-wattled cassowary lives in Australia and the lowland forest along the southern part of New Guinea, so that island just north of Australia. The middle-sized cassowary is called the northern or single-wattled cassowary. It lives on New Guinea, but on the top part of that island, the northern part, and it lives specifically in kind of some river valleys. Sorry, there's a helicopter flying over. So the northern cassowary lives along that northern part of New Guinea and some of the other smaller surrounding islands. And it's still a very large bird as well, coming in between 4'11" up to about 5'10". It's the species of cassowary that is most likely to have red and yellow on its throat. And then the smallest species of cassowary is called the dwarf cassowary. And it kind of lives in the middle of New Guinea up in the mountains. So it lives at higher elevations. And it's quite a bit smaller, coming in about 3.5 feet tall and weighing about 65 pounds. Still a very large bird. And the dwarf cassowary does not have any wattles on its throat, but it does usually contain some purple coloration. So they're very beautiful as well. All cassowaries are what scientists have called frugivores. That's kind of a weird word. I don't know if we've mentioned it on Critter Chat before, but frugivore is an animal that eats specifically fruit. They only eat fruit. They really don't eat much else. Cassowaries, if they can't find fruit, will sometimes eat things like insects or maybe some snails, little tiny animals like that. But it's really rare that they'll go after things that aren't fruit. They live in a rainforest setting, and the rainforest has a lot of different types of plants around, with lots of different fruits and berries that grow on those plants. Scientists have identified over 260 species of plants and the fruits from those plants that cassowaries will eat. For 100 plus of those species, cassowaries are very important for seed dispersal of those type of plants. So as cassowaries eat the fruit, they swallow it, and their digestive tract is very short, so they don't spend a lot of time digesting their food. And so as they poop it out, it actually helps improve the chances of that plant growing from those seeds in the cassowary poop, which is important for the rainforest they live in, because it helps spread out the plants, and those plants are also important to many other species. Now, cassowaries in their rainforest home have an amazing ability to communicate with each other. They typically live solitary or alone, and so they need to be able to find each other when it's time for breeding, and also if they're worried about another cassowary being too close to each other. So they make a variety of different sounds. Typical with the ratites, that's the group of large-bodied flightless birds, which includes ostriches, emus, cassowaries, rheas in South America, and also the kiwis over in New Zealand. Ratites typically can make a booming sound. I've heard it with ostriches quite a bit. It sounds a little bit like a lion's roar, but it's a little more faint and a little lower, a little less scratchy sounding. I have not heard a cassowary boom, but I would imagine it would be very similar in sound. They can also make whistles and hisses. I have heard a cassowary hiss. It is a little threatening. And then when they feel really threatened, they can make a rumble sound. And people who have worked with cassowaries a long time describe that rumble as being so loud and intense that you can feel it in your bones. So I think that sounds pretty terrifying from a bird who's capable of killing you. So definitely, if you ever hear that sound, be prepared to try to get away. Although it is not recommended that you should run from a cassowary because they can outrun you. They've been clocked at running in at 31 miles an hour through the forest. So even in places where the vegetation is really thick, they are capable of running at very fast speeds, way faster than us. In addition to running, they can also kick to defend themselves. We've already talked about their big sharp claw. And they can jump 7 feet straight up. So that means they could come up to here with their feet, which is pretty impressive. If you've ever seen a cassowary in a zoo, you'll notice that the fencing around a cassowary exhibit is typically quite tall for that reason. Cassowaries are considered crepuscular. We have talked about this in Critter Chats before. Crepuscular means that they are active most in the sunrise and sunset times of day, and usually a couple hours on each end of that. They'll typically take a little nap in the middle of the day, and they'll be kind of sleepy throughout most of the night. Active most in the morning and late in the afternoon, just before dark. Now, we talked a little bit about how they're solitary. When they come together for breeding, or if they come together at all, males will usually size each other up, they stare each other down, and then if they feel threatened by the other male, they'll sometimes hiss or kind of lunge towards them. That will usually drive another male off. If a male comes near a female and it's not breeding season, she'll quickly raise up higher and hiss at him, and off he goes. The females being much bigger than the males by about 20%, they can usually scare off a male pretty quick. Now, during breeding season, they start to communicate with each other a little more, and if she likes him, she'll let him stick around, and they'll hang out for a couple of weeks, and then breed, and then when she's ready to lay her eggs, he'll help prepare the nest. The nest is very, very simple. It's pretty much clearing a little spot on the ground, putting in a few leaves, and that's it. She'll lay the eggs. She'll usually lay between 3 and up to 8 different eggs. The eggs are good sized. They're big. They're kind of a green color. The pictures I've seen are almost a jade green. I've never seen a actual cassowary egg. I have seen some mock-ups of them in like a museum setting, but never seen a real one. But the pictures show them being pretty dark colored green, and they're big. They're about 6 inches in length and almost 4 inches across. So they're one of the biggest eggs of all bird species. Not quite as big as an ostrich egg, but ostriches are also a bigger bird. But she'll lay the eggs, and then she's done. She's out. She'll go off and live her life on her own. And the male cassowary actually incubates the eggs, protects the nest, and then once the chicks hatch, he raises the babies by himself. So mom has nothing to do with it once she lays the eggs. In fact, she may go on and breed with another male and lay another nest of eggs for him to watch. And it's been documented that sometimes even 3 clutches of eggs from a single female in a breeding season. The breeding season is usually in the winter, so in that time in the southern hemisphere, that's usually between May and October. That way the babies hatch around the time that the spring and summer are starting in the southern hemisphere, and that's when the food is most abundant for them to eat. So when the babies hatch, they're just little guys. They're kind of brown with stripes. They're ready to go. They're fully feathered, eyes open, able to move around really quickly, and they'll follow dad through the rainforest, finding food right away. And they'll stay with him for up to 9 or 10 months. There's a couple cases where they stay over a year and have stayed almost 16 months, but it's usually he'll kind of ditch the babies or drive them off just before the next breeding season. But if he goes past that breeding season, he'll keep them almost another full year, which is pretty interesting. The baby birds grow pretty quick. They quickly lose the stripiness of their feathering, and then they kind of become a brownish reddish color, and they it takes them about 2.5 to 3 years old before they're considered mature and before they have their adult feather plumage. Sorry, it's a little breezy. My notes keep blowing. Cassowaries out in the wild can live typically around 20 years, though they haven't done a lot of study on this. And in fact, because of the secretive nature of them being solitary and their dark, dense rainforest home, we still don't know a lot about a day-to-day life of a cassowary, although there are some cassowaries near some cities in Australia and where people are. So we've kind of learned a lot more of the Australian cassowaries than we have the other 2 species that live in New Guinea. In a zoo setting, cassowaries can live up to around 40 years, so they can live quite a bit longer in the wild. In addition to medical care and a constant diet, we really don't know why they live so much longer in a zoo setting. That's still something they're trying to figure out. Cassowaries have been kept in human care or in zoos for quite a long time. The Dutch explorers first brought them back to Europe in the 1500s. So they've had them in zoos in Europe for hundreds of years. And even in the United States, they first came to the San Diego Zoo in the 1920s. Although San Diego Zoo was the first zoo to successfully have a baby that reached maturity, that didn't happen until 1957. And it's something that has been really hard for a lot of zoos to replicate since that time. Although there are some in the US that have done better with it, and they tend to be zoos located more in like Florida, and the southeastern portion of the US has had better luck raising cassowaries in zoos. In the United States, if you see a cassowary at a zoo, it's most likely to be the southern or doubled wattled cassowary. The Association of Zoos and Aquariums tends to focus on that species because it is the most threatened of all the species, with especially the population in Australia being quite threatened. The major threats for cassowaries are habitat loss, as the forest in Australia has been cleared for agricultural reasons, and as the population has grown for more cities, and roads and for growing food to feed the people who live there. The population of humans on New Guinea and some of those other islands is considerably lower, and so it's less of an impact in those places. And so the northern and dwarf cassowaries are actually not threatened at all, and really only the Australian population of southern cassowaries are threatened. So aside from habitat loss, a common problem for cassowaries is getting hit by a car. Because they're large and they don't fly, they will wander kind of wherever. They're not really afraid of other animals, but they don't always know how to react to a car. And so unfortunately, vehicle strikes has been a problem in Australia, especially as tourism and other things in the northern part of Australia have grown in recent years. Also, problems are problems caused by dogs attacking them, especially the babies. And sometimes those dogs belong to people. Sometimes those dogs are just free-roaming dogs. That has become a problem as well. And of course, disease can play a problem. And also in Australia, in the area where they live, it is prone to typhoons, which are what Australians call hurricanes. And twice in the last 20 years, they've had huge typhoons come through that have kind of devastated the forest and knocked a lot of the trees out. And after that, they found out that a lot of the cassowary population was really struggling to find food, as a lot of the fruit-bearing trees were kind of destroyed by the typhoon or the hurricane. There is an organization that's doing a lot of great work to help cassowaries out. They are called Rainforest Rescue, and they head up the Save the Cassowaries program in Australia. So they're trying to help make more laws in place so that the forest can thrive and it's not cut down or hurt, and also help raise awareness in the areas where people are driving so that people are paying attention a little more so they don't hit a cassowary. My experience with cassowaries has been brief. They're an animal that has fascinated me for years since I first learned about them watching The Crocodile Hunter on TV many years ago. But it was just in the last few years where I've actually seen a cassowary. I'd been to several zoos that had them, but every time I would happen to go to the exhibit where they had them, I did not see a cassowary. And so the first time I ever saw a cassowary was actually at the Los Angeles Zoo when I visited LA prior to moving here. During my time working at the Los Angeles Zoo, I did some of my zookeeper training with some of the bird keepers who took care of the cassowary, and so I did interact very briefly with the cassowary that lives at the LA Zoo during that time frame. With most zoos who do take care of cassowaries, they never share the same space as a cassowary, and they treat it at the same level of danger as they do something like a big cat or other big predator animals, or even the great apes, where they don't go into the same space because of its ability to attack and cause significant harm to people. So it's always through a protected barrier that they interact with cassowaries. I do look forward to a time in being able to see cassowaries out in the wild. During my time in Australia, I saw them in a zoo setting, but I did not see them out in the rainforest of Australia. The area I was in was not really the range that cassowaries live in. So my next visit to Australia, hopefully I can go up and see them in their rainforest home. I do have a really good friend who has been to that area and spent some time hiking in the rainforest. And one day as she was hiking, she was walking on a trail through thick growth rainforest. She was by herself. As she was walking, she heard some big noise coming up ahead. So she stopped where she had like decent cover and watched very closely. And she saw a father cassowary cross the trail. And just behind him were several cassowary chicks that were already good size. They were about 2.5, 3 feet tall. She sat there very quietly and watched them for about 15 minutes as they came through and ate in a little clearing as they were picking up some fruit on the ground and scratching under some leaves to find the fruit. She was absolutely fascinated to be able to see them that close, and a little bit terrified as she was alone. She knew that if they decided to cause a problem or come after her, she would have a hard time defending herself. And if she got hurt, there wasn't really anyone else to be around them. In Australia, in the area where cassowaries live, they do warn that if you see a cassowary, to please hold very still, be very quiet, try to seek shelter if possible, but do not run from them. In some places, including some of the beaches along that northern area of Australia, cassowaries do sometimes show up on the beach. There's some great photos that I've seen of a beach with people sitting out. There's one where they had like a little picnic basket under a beach umbrella. The people were off playing in the water, and as they came back, the cassowary had sat itself down under their umbrella and was eating the grapes out of their picnic basket. So definitely very opportunistic birds, and they are not really afraid of people too much and will help themselves to food if it's available. So if you ever go to that area of Australia, please be very cautious. Do not ever approach a cassowary. Be very cool, calm, and quiet in their presence. Well, I hope you've enjoyed what I've shared with you about cassowaries today. I have some really fun information and videos that I'll be uploading later today on the Facebook profile, so check those out later today. And as always, the full episode of the Critter Chat will be uploaded to Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. So always feel free to go back and watch any past episodes. And I'm very excited that I am also launching Zoo Nerd, the website. Will be coming up soon, so I'll be putting a link up on the profiles for that as well. So check that out, and feel free to like, share, subscribe, and follow across the platforms of Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and coming soon to the Zoo Nerd website. Until tomorrow, take care, be happy, be healthy, have fun. See ya.